It is about replacing It is about replacing standard maritime security with a highly engineered civilization framework. We're not asking for better patrols. We are deploying a sovereign industrial operating system. On the next slide, slide 2, you will see passive extraction versus 100% industrial authorship. What is passive extraction? For decades, our oceans have been treated as highways for extraction. The global system polices these routes. As you can hear, my dog even agrees with that. They collected tolls, they watched wealth leak through every crack, and they called it maritime security. But that's not what it was. What they really secured was the ability to extract without interruption. We have flipped that model. On the right, 100% industrial authorship. The Ubuntu Oceans policy doesn't secure extraction. It secures authorship. It ensures that every fish, every mineral, every molecule taken from African waters leaves a royalty in African hands. We're not here to secure other supply chains. We are here to reclaim our truth layer. On the third slide, you will see the foundational overview, the 4 pillars. Pillar 1, financial security, which is the keel of sovereignty. Pillar 2, infrastructure and technology, which is the sovereign shield. Pillar 3, human custodianship, which is they are the authors of integrity. And Pillar 4, economic inclusion, SMME corridors. This is the architecture. 4 pillars, each one necessary, none sufficient alone. Think of a ship. The keel is financial security. Without it, you capsize. The hull is infrastructure and technology. It protects what is inside. The crew is human custodianship. They navigate, they decide, they own. And the cargo is economic inclusion. The reason the whole vessel exists in the first place. They are not separate. They are one system. On the slide following, which is Pillar 1, financial security, we have created a new financial instrument, resource-backed keel bonds. They are not sovereign debt in the traditional sense. They are bonds backed by the actual wealth of our oceans, fish stocks, mineral rights, carbon credits. And here is the innovation. These bonds carry a AAA sovereign rating, not because some rating agent in London said so, because the maths says so. The truth premium is our guarantee. Real-time transparency via the 10-dial ledger means investors can see second by second that their capital is secured by actual assets, not beliefs, not anticipation, not promises. The leakage index is our repayment mechanism. We don't pay interest with taxes. We pay it with the revenue we recover from illegal fishing we have stopped. The more we secure our waters, the more we earn. Making security becomes self-funding. When we move to slide 5, which is Pillar 2, infrastructure and technology, you will see that the Tendai Terminal Alpha, which is a part of the sovereign ports architecture, is not a concept. It is physical port architecture that locks shipments if they fail the sovereign audit. If the paperwork don't match the fish, the ship doesn't leave. NeoCanet is our sovereign GIS and fiber network. We don't rent anybody's satellites. We own our data layer. And the Congo Canal is a deep water spine unlocking $45 billion in internal trade with 9 offline Central African countries. Landlocked countries becomes now land-linked. The heart of Africa reaches the sea. Shiny data firewall mirrors every byte moving through subsea cables. Data piracy ends with this. Illicit wealth transfer ends. What flows through our waters stays in our ledger. On slide 6, pillar 3, the human custodianship. The audit guilds, multidisciplinary authors of integrity. They physically and digitally verify the biological truth layer of the ledger. Our research hubs is so that innovation centers bridging indigenous knowledge systems with advanced oceanography. It is because we do not deal in indigenous knowledge systems, we deal in ancestral intelligence. Technology is nothing without people who does not understand it. They must trust it. They must own it. So our audit guilds, they are not regulators. They are the authors of integrity. They walk the shore. They dive the reefs. They verify with their own eyes what the drones detect. Physical and digital intertwined. When we look at our research hubs, because it is ancestral intelligence, my father mapped fishing territories with his eyes and his memory. That knowledge is not primitive, it's data. We are digitizing it, patenting it, owning it. And we are securing sovereign patents before external extraction occurs, not after, before. Because if you want to use our genetic resources, you license from us. You don't discover and own, you ask and you pay. On slide 7, pillar 4, economic inclusion. This is where the wealth lands. The 40% mandate is simple. Any large maritime project must allocate 40% of its operational value to local SME guilds, not as subcontractors, as fraction holders. They own a piece of the operation. The keel fractioning system makes this enforceable. Large projects don't get approval unless they show they are fractioning operations to local hands. The value addition zones are mandatory industrial zones. If you catch Namibian hake in our waters, you don't get to export it raw anymore. You have to process it here. You turn it into medicinal oils, pharmaceutical grade collagen, high value fillets. You leave the value where it was caught. This is how you end raw exports and value addition begins. How do we do this? On the next slide, you will see Tech Stack 1, Blue Heritage Stewardship. This is the technology stack that makes it real. Aquatic Car Operating System is our maritime truth layer. Real-time EEZ telemetry. Dark fleets are no longer dark. AIS spoofing ends. If you're in our waters, we see you. The tender ledger is the immutable memory layer. Every hand that touches a resource is recorded. Every royalty is captured, 100%, no leakage. Our Ngoma's shield is the certification layer, QR codes, NFC chips. Any customs officer in any port can scan a fish and know. Caught legally, processed ethically, royalties paid. A SiliPack and our DISIC CMS is the branding layer. Eco-sovereign packaging that tells the story. The consumer in Paris or Tokyo scans the code and sees the fish of the face of the woman who caught their fish. That's the African premium. That's the margin we keep. On our second tech stack, slide 9, which is our sovereign finance, this is our financial engine. Nzinga and Sentinel drones, they don't just watch. Sentinel collects the eDNA. Every fish gets a genetic birth certificate. You can't launder a fish with a different origin. The DNA doesn't lie. And in Zynga drone, we follow your smell right up to the funnel of your vessel. You see, you can switch off your transponder, but you're still polluting. We will smell you. The processing core takes place in the harmonic engine, takes raw data and converts it into the sustainable value. It calculates not just what the fish is worth today, but what it's worth to the ecosystem, to the community, to the future. Reciprocity multipliers ensure that extraction today pays for restoration tomorrow. The financial output is Bukra coin, a currency backed by living assets, not dead gold. Every coin represents actual, verified, protected marine wealth. Not fiat volatility, not speculative bubbles, just value, anchored in the deep. On the next slide, you will see our sovereign shield, the legal and policy firewalls. When we look at the outer legal firewall and the AI negotiator dynamically invoking security exceptions so that it can neutralize coercive external tariffs. This is the Ubuntu filter and the Ukutula engine. This is our shield. When they try to coerce us with tariffs, with sanctions, with trade wars, the Ukutula engine responds. It's an AI negotiator programmed with one, invoke security exceptions under international trade law. You cannot sanction what the nation deems essential to its sovereignty. But before any project passes, it must clear the 5-point decision firewall. 1. Local capacity. Can we do this ourselves? 2. Value integration. Does it build our economy or does it just extract? 3. Legitimacy. Do our people consent? 4. Reproducibility. Can we do it again sustainably? And then 5. Intertemporal fairness. Does this steal from the future? All 5 must be green. If not, the Ubuntu filter blocks it. Short-term extraction ends, long-term sovereignty begins. Now, how do we transition to this? The roadmap. We use Ubuntu Maths on the next slide, slide 11. The mathematical framework of intertemporal reciprocal oceans valuations. It's not a dream, it's a roadmap. Ubuntu Maths is the framework. It values reciprocity across time. What we take today, we must restore tomorrow. That's not poetry, that's calculus. In phase 1, pilot foundations, Namibian fisheries. We deploy the Tendai ledger, we prove that it works. In phase 2 is integration, where we scale up to continental corridors, connecting the Indian Oceans to the Atlantic, link the Gulf of Guinea to the Red Sea. And in phase 3, sovereign maturity. Ubuntu Math slowly but surely becoming the global standard. It's already in the ESGs. It's already in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's in Norway's Wealth Fund. It's in Germany's dual education system. It's in Canada's new industrial policy, not because we lobbied for it, because it's the only math that accounts for the future. And throughout, we maintain a mandatory 51% sovereign equity buffer in every project, in every corridor, in every partnership. We own the majority, not because we're greedy, because we are the host. And the hosts don't give up the house. It's simple. My closing slide, slide 12. For us, the choice is simple. We can remain the unseen crew, the ones who catch the fish, scrub the decks, watch the wealth sail away on foreign vessels. Or we can become the architects of our own keel. We can design the vessels, own the route, set the terms, keep the value. This presentation is not a request. It's not a proposal. It's not a plea. It's a declaration of sovereign navigation. The architecture is built. The patents are filed. The platform is live. The maths is done. The only question left is, will you be crew or will you be architect? I've made my choice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for an impressive presentation. I have so much to say and perhaps questions, but I'm glad that I do not have that responsibility of sort of reflecting on your presentation, Simone. And I'm going to now pass the baton to Godfrey to respond to your presentation and then introduce himself and then do his presentation before we open the floor to questions. But thank you so much for a very impressive presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ife and Simone. Thank you, as you made me aware of the pronunciation of your name. I think this is quite interesting. I was saying that today, Dr. Ife and Stephanie chose to bring the two Godfreds, for this webinar. Simone has touched on a lot of things, right? And for me, some of the critical things that she's touched on has to do with fisheries traceability. And you cannot talk about fisheries traceability without talking about the issue of IUU fishing, right? She also moves to also look at real-time information, how to more or less own our own oceans in that sense. Just before we started, Dr. Ife did mention about the current geopolitics going on, right? And you all attest to the fact that we say, oh, maybe Ghana can say we're a coastal country or we're a coastal nation, Nigeria, this, but really and truly, do you own your own ocean space? Do you own your own coastal line? These are questions that are critical for us to ask ourselves and then answer. And Simone brings it out perfectly when talking about real-time monitoring. And then she also spoke about economic inclusion, 40% of operational value. Now, for me, it dovetails into local content. What are our various local content policies? What are our various local content laws when it comes to the marine and maritime industry? Do we leave it to chance or do we leave it to those who come in to explore and to exploit? These are critical things that we need to bring our minds to. And most often than not, another critical thing that she did mention was legitimacy. Legitimacy is key for a sustained blue economy to actually take effect or to actually move. We need to understand that our artisanal fisher folks are a critical part of the stakeholders that must be engaged. We need to stop patronizing them. We need to stop those 2-hour engagement with them, and then we think that that is all that it is. But those of you who know, and Dr. Ife will tell you that when the artisanal fishermen rise up, it's always difficult for government. And so when you do not involve them in whatever is being planned, that legitimacy is lost because then they become strangers to whatever is being planned. Sometimes it might be something that will inure to their benefit. But once they were not involved in the process, they become alien to the process. They are disengaged from the process at the onset. And so you do not expect them to uphold whatever is going to come out of that process. And that is where now you start having issues or kind of a pull and push between governments and then artisanal fishermen and other stakeholders. And so for me, these things are very critical. But another interesting part was when Simone mentioned or talked about ESG, right? Environmental social governance. For so long a time, I've always said that for us in Africa, and forgive me, this is not a battle of them versus us, right? I just want to make that clear. But I've always said that for us in Africa, we have always viewed ESG as something that is alien to us, but it is not. Simone speaks about Ubuntu. We all know what Ubuntu means, right? Over here in Ghana, in my dialect, Ghana, we'll say Ekomefemo. In Akan, we'll say what in Kabom. We've always spoken about ESG. ESG principles have actually, or they actually outline how we live our lives as a people. But critically so, it's important that we also navigate and bring forth our own ESG frameworks that speak to our culture, that speaks to our nature as a people. Because I always say that the ocean is vast, right? But the issues of the Gulf of Guinea might be different from the issues of the South China Sea, and likely different from the issues of the Arctic region. Yes, you would have some issues that will be general, but the level of piracy or armed robbery at sea that we see in the Gulf of Guinea might be different from what is happening in the Arctic or in the South China Sea or in the Indian Ocean. So for me, these are critical issues that we must understand. And on the lighter note, before I conclude on this, most often than not, I say that over here in Africa, we have made the sea or the ocean look like a very dangerous place to go, right? So we grew up being told that, hey, don't go near the ocean, you will drown. So it is not even moving us or pushing us to see how far we can go with the blue economy, right? So this whole talk of mommy water, quote unquote, I mean, we have created an atmosphere of fear around our blue economy. And so even engineering a blue economy has now become very, very difficult and quite controversial in some instances. So I will end here and yield to Dr. Ife and Steph. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Godfrey. I'm yielding back to you to now introduce yourself and start your presentation. Please keep it as concise as possible to allow time for questions. Thank you so much. You're on mute. You are on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much. Stephanie, if you could help me with my slides, I'll be grateful.
Yes, sharing in a bit.
All right. But before she even does that, okay, so my name is Dr. Godfred Sowakate. I am the founder and consulting executive director of the Center for Environmental Sustainability, Marine and Maritime Affairs, short CESMA. That's what we call ourselves. My discussion today is on climate change in the context of the law of the sea, challenges and responses. This was actually my dissertation for my PhD. Now, what I want us to put ourselves in is that when we often speak, right, about climate change, the conversation often focuses on melting glaciers, rising temperatures, emission targets and the likes, right? But one of the most profound transformations of climate crisis is unfolding in a space that remains surprisingly underexamined in global governance, and that's the world's oceans, right? Now, my outline is going to look like this. We're going to have the introduction, we're going to have the challenges and human and ocean life. We look at some legal regimes. I will not dwell so much on that. We look at some possible responses, and then the Gulf of Guinea as a case study, and then we'll look at the summary and then the conclusion. For me, I think a critical part of what we need to understand is that what is the intersection between the law of the sea and the global climate change framework, right? And the core question here is, are current legal regimes, that's the UNCLOS, the UNFCCC, and the Paris Climate Agreement, equipped to respond to climate-induced threats to the ocean and the law of the sea? We need to look at various methodologies that have come up. We need to look at the significance of all of these. I always say that there's nothing new under the sun. No research is new. What we always try to do is to add on to what has already been done. And so for me, what I am looking at is, what do we add on? And the focus and the approach is simple. There's a core question. There's a methodology that dwells on doctrinal legal analysis combined with policy-oriented approach. And we also look at issues relating to maritime security in general. And then what is the significance over here? What are we looking at achieving? We are looking at bridging the fragmented regimes that has to do with tackling climate change in its entirety. And in this case, in the context of the law of the sea. The next slide, please, Stephanie. Now we look at regime fragmentation as against regime interaction. We would all agree that we have the Law of the Sea Convention, that's the UNCLOS, which literally regulates our ocean space, right? And we also have the Paris Climate Agreement and then the UNFCCC and all of that. These are various regimes that tackle various things. It would interest us to note that the Law of the Sea regime really dates back to the 80s, but we all agree that since then, a lot of things have taken shape, a lot of things have taken effect, and there's a need for us to see how the current regime of the law of the sea really and truly addresses certain issues that have come up. Now, the issue of climate change and its potential risk really falls in the domain of non-traditional security. Because most often than not, when we talk about traditional security, we're talking about, the issues of warfare and the likes, maritime security in its proper state. But climate change itself has not been treated as urgent as it needs to, and it has not been viewed, in my opinion, within that securitization context. And so we lose sight of that fact. And the Law of the Sea Convention has no article or no clause talking critically about climate change or climate security. Yes, you can make reference to certain articles that will talk about marine pollution in general, right? And how to tackle it, in terms of cooperation and all of that. But we do not have any provision that speaks to that. Then now you look at certain articles within that, and that's UNCLOS at 12, that talks of the protection of marine environment, and this can be read alongside certain UNFCCC commitments, creating interpretive bridges, right? These are bridges that helps us understand, but not necessarily addressing the issues that are in there. So I want us to actually put our minds to that. UNCLOS part 12. At a later time, we could delve into that further. But that talks about protection of the marine environment. The next slide, please. Now, like I've already said, the issue of climate change in the context of the law of the sea brings to bear or brings to the fore certain elements that we cannot write home. That we just cannot write off. We're looking at sea level rise and threatened maritime entitlements. These are critical. And with regard to sea level rise, in Ghana, for instance, in the Ketu South municipality, we've had a lot of issues regarding sea level rise. Townships are being eaten into. People have had to move away from where they were inland. These are issues of critical necessity. These are issues that need to be addressed. These are issues of critical security concerns. And until and unless we come to the realization that these issues need to be addressed, it becomes a problem. Now, what is the projected sea level rise? Now, upper bound projection by 2100 per the 5th IPCC assessment report, you are looking at 98 centimeters. That is huge, and let's not get it twisted. And globally, you are looking at about 200 million people at risk of sea level rise. These are staggering numbers. These are numbers that we just cannot gloss over. These are numbers that we just cannot move away from. And so these are conversations that need to be had, and they need to be had now and not later. The next slide, please. Another element of the critical issue at play over here is reduction in fish stock. We all know of ocean acidification and how that contributes to certain temperature, rises and then all of that. But the fact over here is that when temperature rises, certain fish stock would have to migrate. And that becomes very dangerous for us as a people. And also when temperature rises, you have certain fish stock also going deeper than they are. And you have increased thermal stratification, reducing nutrient upwelling. And these are critical for marine living organisms. And you have salinity changes, also critical for marine living organisms. Once you have all these changes taking place or taking effect, it becomes they have an effect on the fish stock that we are able to bring onshore. And these are elements that need to be addressed. And so Trathan and then Angu would say that management practices may need to be more conservative as climate change potentially introduces a greater level of ecosystem uncertainty, which could mean successful ecosystem outcomes. These are critical things that we need to bring our minds to. Reduction in fish stock is critical. And in later slides, you see why reduction in fish stock is actually very, very, very dangerous for those of us in coastal Africa. The next slide, please, Stephanie. Now, a phenomenon that is growing is climate-induced displacement and climate refugees. How do we define climate refugees in general? Mind you, the UNHCR defines climate refugees broadly as persons forced to flee their homes because climate change has rendered continued habitation impossible, whether through inundation, desertification, or the collapse of subsistence resources. You would also know that in the UNHCR Charter, in the Refugee Charter, there is no explicit mention of climate refugees. This is a phenomenon that is growing. You have states that are being more or less swept underwater. And you can actually see in the slide over here, we have today the consequence of war, right? And we have tomorrow the consequences of climate change. Underwater cultural heritage will let you understand that there are some cities that have been buried underwater because those cities were swallowed up by the ocean. It's not far-fetched. We have the case of Kiribati. We also have the likes of Vanuatu that are currently struggling. And let's not even move too far off. You have certain, small island developing states around us here in Africa. We can talk about Cabo Verde, we can talk about Seychelles, we can talk about Sao Tome and Principe. These are communities, or these are countries that are facing imminent danger with regard to climate-induced displacement and the phenomenon of climate refugees. Now imagine the current migration trends and how Europe seems to be complaining. And imagine a climate refugee crisis befalling certain coastal regions or certain coastal states in Africa. What is our response going to be like? Are economies even engineered to withstand those kind of shocks? Can we even come together as a union or as Africa to say, you know what, we are going to tackle it this way or that way? These are things that we need to be asking ourselves. What are the legal protections? What are the gaps involved in there? And what are the security challenges that climate-induced displacement and climate refugees might bring with it? The next slide, please. Now we look at the current frameworks addressing ocean climate nexus. We have the UNCLOS, we have the UNFCCC, which I've made mention of. We have the Kyoto Protocol, we have the Paris Climate Agreement, and then we have the Conference of Parties. The next one, the next slide. So let's look at certain supporting legal principles and emerging instruments. We have the Nansen Initiative of 2015. We have the Principle 15 of the Rio Declaration that has to do with the precautionary approach. And for me, this stands out because this is critical, right? Principle 15, we know that in the absence or whilst you are working towards scientific certainty, there's the need for you to take precaution. So whilst we are working towards scientific certainty regarding the ocean climate nexus, there's a need for us to take precaution, because precaution will let us understand that there are certain precedents or there are certain elements already happening. For instance, reduction in fish stock, climate-induced displacement, and climate refugees. These are things that we need to take notice of. We also have this fish stock agreement of 1995. We have the common but differentiated responsibility. The CPDR principle is simple and straight to the point. It virtually tries to say that we all pollute or we all contribute towards pollution, right? But we have different levels of pollution. So in that case, my responsibility should not be as much as yours if I pollute less. And we do know that when it comes to pollution, Africa is said to be polluting roughly about, 3%, in that regard. But in terms of our responsibility, what are our responsibilities? And those who are polluting more, are they really being responsible? We can talk about the carbon markets that that can be a conversation for another day, because even the issue of the carbon markets in itself is bedeviled with a lot of problems, is bedeviled with a lot of corruption in its own, regime. So that is something to be spoken about later. Then we now talk about the High Seas Treaty and then the BB&J agreement. By the grace of God, we now have a High Seas Treaty that has come into force. But let's see how enforceable it can actually be. Then we have the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. So these are certain principles, these are certain instruments or emerging instruments that are being used in the space to regulate or to mitigate the issues, relating to climate change and then the ocean. The next slide, please. We now look at certain supporting, the next one's there. Thank you. What are the insufficiencies? What are the, insufficiencies in this framework? And I believe I've already mentioned them, because, the lawyers will let you know that the law must be clear. It must be clear. We have to hit it on the head. UNCLOS, like I've said, doesn't have any provision relating to climate change and climate security. The UNFCCC, the Paris Climate Agreement, they do not really speak to the issues pertaining to the ocean. And so these are certain insufficiencies. These are certain insufficiencies in the framework that we have currently. The next slide. Now let's look at the Gulf of Guinea as a regional case. And we'll look at it in this sense. We'll look at sea level rise, which causes destruction of coastlines, increased coastal erosion, and cause more temporal and permanent flooding tides in low-lying coastal environments. We have reduction in fish stock. The inconsistent temperature of the Gulf of Guinea waters will result in the reduction of migration of certain fish stock. We also have territorial sovereignty and land reclamation issues. Coastal erosion may lead to territorial disputes, since nations in the region would want to reclaim land lost, and in some instances adjust or readjust their lands in a bid to avoid and mitigate such erosions. We have extortion and armed robbery or piracy. We have loss of livelihood could trigger criminal activities along and on the Gulf of Guinea. And then you have climate refugees, which I've spoken extensively on. So these are elements that we cannot run away from, because the truth of the matter is that when there's loss of livelihood, when you have migratory, fish stock migrating, and the fisher folks go in and they're not able to have a good catch, and they come back without it, and for months and months and months and months, is the same issue. This is their livelihood. What do you expect them to do? That is when now we have issues like armed robbery at sea. And then you will now graduate to piracy. So these are very, very, very critical things that we cannot gloss over. A few days ago, we had an issue of armed robbery at sea here in Ghana, in Senyabreku. Definitely investigations are still underway. But it brings to mind the essence of the security of our oceans and how it is important that we look at it holistically. The next slide, please. So with this slide, I would let Stephanie play a video, and I'll stop it at a point. I still have a few minutes.
Pay with Klarna everywhere. Get a debit card that lets you pay later.
Please
Sign
forgive
up
YouTube.
now.
My apologies.
Academia, let's get into our communities. The culture of teenage girls trading sex for fish in coastal communities of the Half Assini in the Jomoro district of Western Region is commonplace. The girls beg for fish during substantial catch and return sexual favor as payment to the fishermen. It's termed fish for sex in the local community. Joining us, Stanley Niblewo was there to dig into this worrying culture and now reports.
Half Assini is one of 26 coastal communities in the Jomo municipality of the Western Region with prevalent teenage sexual exploitation. Its vibrant shore attracts loads of towpokes daily when canoes that go for fishing expeditions land ashore. On occasions where the fishermen have a substantial catch, teenage girls will come to the beach to beg for fish for their families' upkeep, become the target of sexual exploitation, as every fish they receive from the fishermen is paid back through sex. As a result, teenage pregnancy and single parenthood are a common phenomenon in the community, with little being done by local stakeholders to address the situation. The practice is termed by indigenes as fish for sex, and this is confirmed by the deputy manager of the Jomo Fisheries Commission, Irene Obey.
The girls are young, so the fishermen take advantage of the situation and have sex with them. Fish for sex is prevalent here.
The barter sex trade is fueled largely by poverty and parental neglect. Semenya Maxwell, a fisherman with more than a decade fishing experience, opens up on the level of exploitation.
Everybody will be struggling for the fish. So if you can assess the one who is there and he's also giving you, and he also has something, that means you also give you fish, give me sex, give you fish, give me barter system that way.
Maxwell.
Okay, so I think we can pause it here.
Fish gifts also exist in the community.
Thank you, Stephanie. I think we can pause it here. But just look at this and look at what the fisherman said. Give me fish, give me fish, give me sex, give me fish, give me sex. It's a barter system. Now imagine how rampant this is going to be when you have fish stock depletion as a result of climate change. Imagine how rampant it's going to be. And imagine how this is going to contribute to gender-based violence. We cannot run away from it. So these are critical things that we need to understand. These are critical conversations that we need to have. Because not having these conversations mean that we are putting the life of our women, of our young ladies at risk because of the attendant problems that reduction in fish stock brings with it. The next slide, please. Now, what's the way forward? We need to reform frameworks, we need to bridge the gap, and we need to adopt a protocol that works very well, protocols that are clear in terms of their legal language and address the problems as they are. The next. So we've talked about integrated and comprehensive protocol. We are looking at ocean-centered priority. We are looking at enforceable obligations. We are looking at human security focus because that is critical in what we are talking about here. The next slide, please. So what's the summary and conclusion? What is the way forward? The way forward is simple. There's a threat currently knocking on our doors. We cannot be oblivious to the fact that climate change has a direct impact on the ocean. Climate change has a direct impact on marine life. Climate change has a direct impact on maritime activities. And until and unless we adopt certain frameworks or amend certain frameworks to reflect our current realities, we will just be going to one COP after the other, attaining and achieving nothing. And that is why for the past 3 decades, we've been attending COP. And if nothing is done, there'll come 5 decades of us still attending COP. Whilst we know what to do, to alleviate the problem or the situation at hand, but we sit aloof and we attend COPs upon COPs upon COPs and talk without achieving our aim. And climate change will come and swallow us all up. So this is what I have to present. It's a research still in motion, and we welcome any comments, any contributions, and any constructive criticisms. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm trying to unmute. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. Again, I'm so happy I don't have the responsibility of reacting to your presentation. And with the time in mind, I'm going to yield to Simone to give a response to your presentation before we open the floor for questions. Thank you again, Godfrey. Simone, are you still here?
I think she's muted.
Oh.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. You spoke directly into my heart. What you have just outlined is the reason why I do what I do. That exploitation of those girls on the beach, that would not happen if we stop wanting to police our oceans to protect extractive trade routes. I have a couple of observations and questions that I would like to leave you with. You don't have to answer them all now, but I would like to leave them with you because I believe that they can, what I call, harden what you've just done for the future. First of all, on the regime fragmentation, you present fragmentation as a problem, and it is. But fragmentation also creates strategic openings. My question is, have you considered whether the gaps between regimes might be intentionally exploitable? I will leave you to think on that. You cite Barrett 2016 on the law of the seas flexibility. This is crucial. You might want to push this further because it has evolved through implementing agreements, soft law, state practice, and judicial interpretation. My question is, could you map which climate-related measures are already possible under existing law of the seas flexibility without a new treaty? For example, using, I think it's, let me count the X's. I think it's part 6 or 7 that mandates climate impact assessments for high seas activities. I will send you this afterwards, and you can use this. It is to interpret marine environment to also include climate systems, and to use the precautionary approach, which is principle 15, that will justify preemptive action. On the Paris Agreement's oceans deficit, you rightly note that COP25 was the first formal recognition of the ocean's climate nexus. But COP25 produced no binding obligations. The question that I want to ask there is the problem the text of the Paris Agreement, or is it the implementation? The Paris Agreement is flexible by design. Is the ocean deficit in the instrument, or is it in our failure to use it? On climate refugees, which is by far the most urgent gap that you've identified, the 1951 Refugee Convention does not cover climate displacement. The Nansen Initiative and the Global Impact Compact, they're non-binding. You have diagnosed the gap. So what is your proposed legal architecture to fill it? Even if you just end up sketching the shape of a solution, that might work, which you have done at the end when you proposed a specific setup. The Gulf of Guinea case study, it's heart-rendering. You see, I'm the daughter of a fisherman. I come from a long line of nautical seafarers. I know the difference in the fishing industry, where your career is a career of choice and a career of necessity. I was just blessed. For me, it's a career of choice. But for many of us, it's a career of necessity. This is the heart of your presentation, and it's powerful, very powerful. My question is, are you treating them as separate threads, or are you treating it as a system? On your solution where you ask for an integrated instrument, I agree, but I want to challenge it. Integrated under which regime? Under UNCLOS? Under UNFCCC as a freestanding treaty, as a regional agreement that then scales? What is your recommended legal pathway, and how would we get there? Closing thoughts that I would like to leave you. You have done the hard work of mapping the legal terrain. The gaps are clear, the stakes are clear. The Gulf of Guinea is a warning to the world. The next step is to move from diagnosis to prescription.
Yep.
I look forward to seeing how your research develops. The oceans are waiting, but the climate is not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simone. Very
Thank
instructive.
you. Thank you so much, Simone, and thank you also, Godfrey. Thanks to the participants and everyone that is listening. I'm now going to invite you to ask your questions. You can indicate by raising your hand if you have a question. I note that there was a question from Maria about the ESG, and that has been answered by Simone on the chat. But there is another question by Maria as well, who is asking Godfrey this direct question. Considering that many coastal regions in Africa and Latin America face similar climate and fisheries challenges, how realistic do you think it is to achieve international consensus for a new integrated ocean climate protocol? Godfrey, if you can be as concise as possible, because I
Okay, let
see
me
that
be as concise.
Thank you. If you
I'm a
have questions,
realist.
indicate by raising your hand. Thanks.
I am a realist, right? And so to answer Maria, I would say that achieving immediate global consensus will be difficult and it's going to take a while. But while we are still looking at that, it is critical that we sit and look at the various frameworks. UNCLOS is not going to give way for anything. I mean, let's face it, Dr. Ife, you are very much aware of that. You've been in this space for long. There's no way the UNFCCC is also going to give way. Now, what I'm proposing is, it kind of addresses it at the short term or medium term. Let's see how best to put in, if we are not going to amend, let's see how best to put in certain protocols, right, that are legally binding, because that is the problem that we have. Some protocols that we have in there or that have come to add on are not legally binding. They are more of a moral suasion kind of thing, So yes, Maria, it's important, but to answer your question as a realist, achieving international consensus, I don't think we are going to come at it anytime soon, because states have their own personal interests and regions have their personal interests. So all those come into play. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Simone, I wonder if you have anything to add to this, because I feel that your presentation actually basically talks about the solution that of the issues that Godfrey talked about. Essentially, you don't need anybody's permission if you can start doing these things yourself, since the resources lie within your space. So I wonder if you want to add to the response or to the question.
You are taking the words right out of my mouth. Gottfried?
Yes,
I'm
Simone.
old. I don't ask permission from anybody anymore. For Africa to access funding, to access instruments like debt for nature swaps, debt for infrastructure swaps, Africa needs a truth layer to turn her oceans into bankable assets. That's exactly what I'm doing. When you look at my presentation, you will see I refer to very specific tech stacks. One of them is called Sentinel drone. Sentinel is a drone that goes into the oceans, scoop up water in dense nutritious places, emerge out of the water, filters the water out, and keeps the genetic material. That's environmental DNA. Without me having to catch the fish, without me having to harm the plants, I can now issue a digital genetic birth certificate for it. That digital sequence gets then logged on the Tendai ledger. That makes our oceans a bankable asset because it filters through Aquatica into the harmonic kernel system that assigns it a sustainable value, and the money value of it gets reflected in Bukra. Now you have a verified ocean that is a bankable asset. Whose permission do I then need to trade with my bankable asset? Nobody. The difference, I work from the bottoms up. I don't work from the top down because I don't have time to massage all those dramatic egos. I'm a fisherman's child. I come from this environment. I've seen what top-down approaches does to my people. Flip the table. If the grant requirements ask we should make our things a bankable asset with a truth layer to quantify that we can participate in debt for nature, debt for infrastructure swaps, then we will do it from the bottom. To sit around and wait for the permission from someone, I unfortunately will not be joining that queue.
All right, thank you so much for that response. And I think your responses so far somehow touches on the question from Dorcas, which is the second and probably the last question we have, because I'm not seeing any other question or any hands up. Dorcas Ethang asks, there seems to be a notion that consensus is indeed possible within the state and across the continent. How can communities be the starting point for consensus building? Godfrey.
For me,
Oh, okay. Any of you can take it.
Okay, let me be brief so that Simone can. In my presentation, I did speak about the need to involve the local people or the local community, and I think I touched on it with regard to Simone's presentation too. We really cannot achieve much when we leave those that this really matter to on the fringes, and that is our artisanal fishermen. Those are the people on the coast, the fisher folks, the everyday fisher folks. Yes, you can achieve consensus, but you need to have these people on board to achieve it. And it shouldn't be in a patronizing way. You need to take them on from the onset till the end. You don't start with them, and then once you get somewhere, you put them aside, and then you go finish it, and then you bring it back to them. That is not consensus. When you bring it to them in terms of a finished policy, they are going to revolt or kick against it because they are strangers to it. They do not understand it. I think I would pause here so that Simeone can also take a bite on it.
people like to frame it, them, the fishermen and us. I don't, because I'm not them. I am them. I am from that community. So for me, there is no them and us. I am part of that. I grew up in that. So my links to the fisherman community stretch for thousands of years. I'm from a tribe that's 75,000 years old. That's how deep my roots stretch into Africa and into my communities. So I don't have the divide between us and them. I am the them. I am the us. That is where Ubuntu mathematics came in so critically, because I am, because we are. When you walk away from the notion that you need to receive an instruction, you need to be given permission, that is because you are entertaining words in your vocabulary that was designed to keep you in those chains. Empowerment. That means I don't have power. You need to grant me some power. Capacity building. You're implying I'm an empty vessel. Corruption. Corruption doesn't even form part of my epistemology. My uncle asked, who's corruption, when he's at home in his pajamas? We didn't know the word. So I have decoupled from colonization very firmly. I even published a book on it. It's called Return to Sender, where I'm saying you can take your poisonous seeds and your poisoned harvest and keep it. So my response to this is Africans need to unchain themselves to languages that labels them and stop responding to it, number one. And number two, We need to take responsibility for ourselves by asserting our authorship, by asserting our design rights, not by who's the ombudsman for that? Whom do you go and ask to give you permission for this? Nobody. Because you believe you've been disempowered, somebody must empower you. No, I don't do that at all. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much, Godfrey and Simone, for an impressive presentation, responses to the questions as well. Thank you so much to our listeners and participants for staying with us from the beginning. I don't know if there's any other. Is there? Okay, hold on.
I think there's a question from Peter.
Oh, on the chat? Have I missed it?
Yes, I've kind of answered it
Okay.
already, but I can still touch on it again. I think it's asking about it's asking whether there's need for another international framework to tackle the issue of climate change with regard to the oceans.
Okay.
Right.
So,
I mean
Peter,
that
Adu. Yeah.
exactly. Well, the answer to this, Peter, is very simple and short. There's no need for any more frameworks. We are becoming a people of too many frameworks. The frameworks that are already there need to be strengthened. They need to be brought to the current realities by attaching certain protocols to it that are legally binding. We don't need to have a new framework for climate change and the oceans in that sense. No, because then comes about the issue of regime fragmentation again. It's just too many things to follow, or too many things to bring our minds to. The frameworks that are already there, I'll not say are okay, but they can be made better by attaching certain protocols if there's need for amendment, by amending certain provisions. I mean, Dr. Ife will tell you that she and I had a conversation about looking at UNCLOS and even the IMO regime. What is maritime? I mean, what is armed robbery at sea? What is piracy at sea? So yes, our frameworks currently lack certain, dimensions, but we don't need to enact new ones. We can just improve upon what we already have so that we don't have more regime fragmentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for the really great comments and questions that you've asked. The comment from Nee saying synergy between different frameworks and implementation with proper legal backing at a national level is key. And I think that's a very good note to end, because at the end of the day, the continent doesn't lack framework. We actually have some of the most amazing and beautifully written framework ahead of the global communities. But the biggest challenge we have on the continent have been implementation and actually walking the talk on implementing these things. So thank you so much, Godfrey and Simone. Thanks to everyone for participating. And if you're listening and you're an early career researcher, you're working at the margins of the ocean and oceans governance and related issues, please submit an abstract. We would love to invite you to come and speak to us about the work that you're doing in this space and share your work with every other person. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Oh, Godfrey?
Yes, I just want to say a quick thing. So I'm in my Ghana jersey because today is the Independence Day of Ghana, my beloved country. 69 years ago, our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, "At long last, the battle is ended, and Ghana, our beloved country, is free forever." He went further to say the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Definitely, that's a conversation to have another day. But yeah, today is Ghana's independence, so happy Independence Day to my beloved country, Ghana.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that's an amazing way to end. Happy Independence Day to Ghana. Thank you. And like I said, if you're an early career researcher or practitioner working at the margins of the topics that we're talking about or we've discussed, we would absolutely love to hear from you. We would love for you to share your work through the Just Security dialogue. So please send an email and reach out. Thank you so much. Stephanie, have I missed out anything? Is there anything else you'd like to add before we say our goodbyes?
No, I think that's fine. I put up the email address on the screen. I don't know if it's still showing, just so that if you want to share your abstract in terms of speaking at a future session that we have, you can do so by sending that to the email address on the screen. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn. We are on LinkedIn as Just Security Dialogues. Again, I've put that on the screen as well.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye, and
Thank you
thanks
for
for
having
joining.
me.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.